Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Drive Pink Dialogue. This is episode number 35, and tonight we are talking about how Inter Miami crossed the continent to go grab 3 points at the Vancouver Whitecaps. Before we talk about that, and we'll give out some awards, and we'll break down why the game happened and what happened and why it played out the way it did. But before all of that, as always, I'm your host, Scotty. I'm here with my co-host, Saur. How you feeling tonight, man?
I'm feeling great, man. The sun in Puerto Rico is shining. Apparently, the sun in Vancouver is shining as well because Inter Miami got a road victory without their heavy hitters. And what a fantastic way to cap off the weekend. This was a proper football win. So, a lot to discuss today, and let's get straight into it.
Well, before we get into the game, there was some breaking news today that I think probably deserves mention. We aren't going to have a midweek episode this week because there is the Atlanta United game. So our midweek episode will be the pregame and postgame for that. And so I don't really know when we'll have a better time to talk about this until, for a couple of weeks. But that is a surprise inclusion to a Copa America roster, and a very big one, and that's Luis Suarez. It was reported today that he is going to be selected for the Uruguay national team for the Copa America. Not something we projected, not something we thought would happen. I think there's a lot of reasons, and maybe we can get into that for a minute or two. But it does sound like he's going to be on the roster for Copa America for Uruguay, and not with the Inter Miami Herons. And so, two big players that we are losing for the 7-game summer window, or up to 7-game window. First thoughts.
If Campana hadn't scored those 2 goals in the last couple of games, I would have been a lot more concerned about it. But it seems like he's rounding off into a good set of form. So to lose Luis Suarez is obviously going to be a big issue. But I think we have cover enough in that spot, and Campana can do a job. We've been screaming out about him being a player that needs rhythm and that needs playing time. And that's going to be a perfect opportunity for him to just get some more games and maybe show why he's considered the best number 2 striker in the MLS.
I did a little bit of digging into why this is happening. He hasn't been with the Uruguay national team for a little bit. They hired a high-pressing, high-tempo coach in Marcelo Bielsa after the last World Cup. And so it's been a new system for Uruguay. It feels like they had a changing of the guard. And so some of those legends of Uruguay, like Luis Suarez and Cavani and guys like that, had been phased out of the team. So there was no reason to expect that Luis Suarez would be a member of the Copa America roster. He has been in great form, but he was in great form last year in Brazil, and so that's not really the reason. I just think he wasn't a stylistic fit for a team that's trying to play high energy, high tempo soccer like Bielsa teams do. But it turns out that their backup striker, Federico Viñas, was confirmed to be out for the Copa America because of injury today. And so Luis Suarez is getting the call to be the replacement. He will be the backup to Darwin Nunez in that tournament. And a veteran, they went to 26-man rosters. You can see why this makes sense, but tough for Inter Miami because I'm sure people were getting their hopes up that he was going to be around, and maybe that's not going to be the case.
Yeah, and it's kind of tough to lose him, especially when he's going to be back up and he's not going to get as many minutes off the bench as he normally would with the international team. So to lose him for that many games is going to be a big issue. But I don't know, man. They could have gone with a more young striker, give someone the opportunity. And I'm surprised that Bielsa has gone with Suarez because he's not necessarily a pressing beast in any measure. So that's a bit surprising. But it is what it is. Good for Suarez to be back into the international fold. Hopefully Uruguay has a good. Actually, no. Hopefully Uruguay does not have a good tournament, because if they get kicked out early, then Suarez comes back early, which is great for us. So yeah, but I am worried about our backup striking options because Campana is going to have to carry the load. We'll see. We're just going to have to deal with it.
Yeah, and listen, Inter Miami is not going to be the only team that's dealing with these types of issues. I'm sure there's several MLS strikers that are going to be at this tournament. And so it is what it is at this point. I just wanted to check their group because they are in a group with the U.S. men's national team, Panama and Bolivia. So they're going to be favorites to get out of that group, and that USA game will be probably the highlight of the group stage for them and for the U.S. So big moments. He is going to be the backup striker, so I don't think we need to worry about him getting injured or overused or anything like that. And I think veteran presence, legend presence, that type of thing. He adds that dimension to their team. But anyways, I do think we probably feel a little bit better, as you mentioned, because of what we've seen over the last 96 minutes, going back to the beginning of extra time against DC United. We will talk about Leo Campana a lot in this episode. But before we do, let's pull up the lineup and just take a trip down memory lane of what we got last night. Campana did start. Luis Suarez, Messi, and Sergio Busquets didn't make the trip. Yannick Bright gets his first start. I'm sure we'll talk about him a lot. To me, the most exciting thing was by adding Yannick Bright into the midfield, it completely restructured what we were able to do in the midfield, or at least that's what I thought going in. Do you feel like we had a lot of our assumptions confirmed while we watched that game?
Yeah, I think in last night's episode, I said clearly that the wing play is going to be absolutely key. And Robert Taylor was an absolute beast on that left wing side. Um, I think the way that we played, we wanted to use him as the main outlet from to build out our attacks. And Gressel was on the ball a little bit in the middle. And the way the midfield was set up, it did feel like a lot of our assumptions were confirmed. Rojas was sticking to the right side for at least the first 15, 20 minutes, occasionally switching with Gressel here and there. But I love the midfield balance, man. For me, the midfield balance was absolutely fantastic. And at least in the first half. And then, yeah, we got the couple of goals that we got. Eventually, we got a bit tired, and we're going to talk about what happened during the game. But in terms of the lineup, I think this was a fantastic lineup. I really wanted to see what this team could produce, and they got the win at the end of the day.
Yeah, two things that I was really intrigued about going into the game was that we had a really long travel trip there. It's 8 hours. It's across the continent. It's the farthest trip in MLS, and we made it and didn't seemingly take negative effects. I didn't think there was a lack of energy. I didn't think there was any jet lag, anything like that from the players, which was good to see. And then also we were getting a talent equated game, maybe not talent equated, but more talent equated game than we've really gotten in a long time, maybe on this entire sort of winning streak we've had. And so I wanted to see how that dynamic played. And I think the team handled both of those things really well. I thought the starting 11 handled both of those things really well. Not pictured here is that Federico Redondo was available off the bench, and we did get a chance to see him. And so I have nothing bad to say. It was all good going in, and I think that it proved to be what we thought it might.
Yeah, it wasn't an easy victory by any means. We've become so used to watching Inter Miami absolutely steamroll teams, and that wasn't it. This was a lot more 50-50, back and forth sort of a game where they had some chances. We had some really good chances, especially in that first half. And we fought for this victory. We deserved this victory at the end of the day, but it was a hard fought, great game that needed some sort of tactical adjustments, and a lot of the players needed to be sharp throughout the game. And I thought they were razor sharp in the final third. And some of the football that we played looked absolutely brilliant at times. And I was really surprised by how well we adjusted without having some of our superstars in this lineup, because the worry with this team has been that it doesn't perform when Messi's not in or when Busquets not in. And this time we were lacking three of them. We didn't have a focal point up front with Suarez. Busquets was not controlling the midfield, and Messi was not there doing his magical things that he normally does. And yet, we looked so dangerous in that final third. Defensively, we were still sound. Defensively, we still had our wits about. So, for me, I think it was a perfect performance, or the best performance that we've had without our superstars this season. I absolutely loved it from start to finish.
Yeah, and it does feel like, and maybe this is just a precursor to when we talk about how everything went down, oftentimes when you have Lionel Messi and Luis Suarez, it's sort of a, okay, how do we not screw this up? Because if we do what we're supposed to do, we'll win because we have much better players. And this game wasn't that. It was, we needed to be on it. We needed to be sound. We needed to be well structured. And I think the team did a really good job of that. Just heading into the moments in the first half that kind of stood out to me, there was a sort of lofted ball in the 3rd minute that Campana tries to head in. There's not a lot of force on it, but he tries to create the force. It was saved by the keeper, but sort of one of those saves by the keeper where his hand was just in the right place, and it didn't go in. Kremaski was there, but I think hard to blame Campana for not, dumping that ball off to Kremaski from the 4-yard mark. And then in the 6th minute, a speculative shot by Matías Rojas from maybe 4 or 5 yards outside the box. 2 early, I don't know if they were chances, but dangerous moments where we were getting the ball in good spaces. And it was a good start for Inter Miami. We talked about in the pregame show how maybe we've evolved past these slow starts where we were conceding early and we were struggling to get going. And it was mostly because we weren't coming out hot. It feels like maybe we put that in the past. And these 2 half chances were sort of a demonstration of that.
Yeah, and I'm not going to talk too much about the tactics because we're going to go into detail in a little bit, but it just seemed very clear how we wanted to play. We wanted to play through the wide channels, and a couple of chances, some of the half chances, were simply because Robert Taylor was being a menace in that left wing side. And the chance that Campana had that you mentioned at the start with the header in the 3rd minute, that was a full clear chance. That should have technically been a goal because he was point blank on goal. Great save by the keeper, but it was straight at him. But it just seemed like we were on top of it to begin with. We had a plan, we had a strategy, we knew how to get at them. And it just felt like we were executing it really well because as soon as we got the ball in the final third, we were a threat.
Yeah. And just a few minutes later, we have another opportunity. Kremaski gets a ball from Alba, and on the first touch, he plays it over the top back to Jordi Alba. And Alba, on a very narrow angle, shoots and tries to get it near post past the keeper instead of dumping it off at the cross. I think maybe he thought he would be able to, trick the keeper and have the keeper go for the cross instead, and he just sneak it in. Not the case, and unfortunate because Matías Rojas was wide open for a tap, and if he did play it across. And fortunately, I think looking back, that wasn't a moment that we really regretted or rued. You feel good about that play, though, because it was good build-up play, a young player making a nice, ball over the top, and Kremaski and Jordi Alba doing what Jordi Alba does.
Yeah, I remember texting you at that time, and I was like, this is exactly how we want to play with this setup and this team. You mentioned Kremaski, but you didn't mention what actually happened before this, the play actually began. So Yannick Bright won it in the midfield. Gresso took the ball, passed it over all the way to Robert Taylor, who then passed it off to Alba, who then passed it off to Kremaski, who then flicked it over back to Alba. And Alba had a wonderful chance to just lay it off for Matías Rojas, who was waiting there in that exact position that we mentioned in the pregame show where we want him to be. Those were the kind of positions that I wanted Matías Rojas to take up. And it was just the perfect example of how this system is going to work when we need it to work. And it was just beautifully done. Just unfortunate that it didn't finalize into a goal. But I think all players there, everyone contributed exactly the way they should have and exactly were doing what they should have been doing.
Yeah, and absolutely excellent point. And it's putting guys in positions to succeed. You have your defensive midfielder win the ball. You have your excellent passer and crosser of the ball and Julian Gressel get the ball forward. And then you have Robert Taylor and Jordi Alba combined down that left side where they're both dangerous. And then you get the ball to your advanced playmaker who can put the ball in a dangerous area in Kremaski. And really, Jordi Alba dumping that ball off to Matías Rojas and a tap in would have made this a tutorial goal where you sort of show it to everyone moving forward to show you how to play and score goals, and especially in transition, because it was beautiful. Just 30 seconds later, that's when we have the handball. I believe it was on Ahmed, but that moment where he catches the ball and then he kicks it up right off his own hand in the penalty box. They waved it off. They didn't look on it. And they didn't look at it with VAR. Any thoughts on that? Because there's sort of a similar situation in the second half that I thought was related.
For me, I think that was a penalty. He handled the ball. His hand was in an unnatural position. I know he kicked it up, and unfortunately for him, he kicked it on his hand. But I thought it was a clear penalty. If it would have gone to VAR, it would have been a penalty. But I'm not too concerned in the sense that if it was the decision of the on-field umpire and they did not want to go to VAR, that's fine for me as long as they're consistent with their decisions. But I thought that should have been a penalty.
I agree with you 100%. Textbook, that's a penalty. I will say, though, early in the second half, there was a ball that came off Christoph's hand in the box that it was off a shot from Picault. And I think they did it justice by calling them both the same way. And so
Yeah.
I'm not upset about the first call because they called it the same way in the second opportunity. And so if that had gone against us, I would have been really mad about the first one. But because they called it the same way both times, I feel fine with that. And then the last play in the first half is the goal. Jordi Alba plays an exceptional ball forward to Robert Taylor, who cuts in on his right foot and places it perfectly in the side netting, and Inter Miami goes up 1-0 in the 38th minute.
Yeah, that wasn't an easy finish. That was a fantastic finish. Such an underrated finish.
It was an easy finish for Robert Taylor.
Yeah, well, and we said yesterday, I think while we were finishing off, we mentioned that Robert Taylor's due performance and a half, and boy, he delivered, because that entire half was, I thought he touched the ball more than any other player on that pitch because everything was channeling through him and Jordi Alba, and that seemed to be the game plan. And it worked to a T because that goal just simply summed up how well we were playing on that side of the pitch. Beautifully taken. The ball was fantastic. The assists, I mean, only Jordi Alba can do it. And that's when you miss a player like Jordi Alba. I love Franco Negri. He's really good defensively, but he can't do that. And in the absence of Messi, you need somebody else to try and find those line-breaking passes. That's what Jordi Alba did. Amazing first touch by Robert Taylor to take it away from the defender and set himself up. And then I had no doubt in my mind that he would score as soon as he shot that. So beautifully done.
Yeah, beautiful shot. Robert Taylor on his right foot, he can do stuff like that. And I thought it was, you mentioned that we went through Robert Taylor a lot. We played through that left side a lot in that first half and really throughout the game. And I think this might be the way to do it when you don't have Suarez and Messi. Because we tried it last week with Orlando City on the opposite side and trying to play through Matías Rojas, and it didn't really come off, and we didn't score in that game, and Robert Taylor wasn't able to really be impactful, and I think this is better. Now, I know we didn't have Jordi Alba for that Orlando City game, but still, I think this is better when you play through Robert Taylor and let him be dynamic and cut both on his right foot and on his left foot and create. I just think it's a winning formula, or it's a good formula. And then that took us into halftime. I personally thought we were doing phenomenal at halftime. I thought this was our game to win. I thought, considering we were going on the road without some of our best players, we showed tremendous chemistry. We were playing exactly like we were supposed to. And most importantly, the structure of the team was right, well-balanced, and disciplined. And I really loved everything I was seeing from the team in that first half.
Yeah, for me, I think what stood out the most was we've always talked about what potential this team has, the depth that this team has, the kind of players that we have on paper. But somehow, for some reason, every time our superstar players are not there, it just seems to fall short of expectations and we don't perform up to the levels. And it's always been we need Messi off the bench or we're just not able to win the game. And we need a spark to lift ourselves up. This, for me, was a perfect half in terms of what this team is actually capable of. If you set them up the right way, all these players can perform exceptionally well. And honestly, I go back to what you tweeted yesterday. This team can go toe to toe with some of the best MLS teams without even having its superstar players. I'm not saying we're going to beat them every single day, but I think the performance just justifies exactly why we talk about the depth of Inter Miami, because it was fantastic. And defensively, offensively, the plan was working and everyone was doing their job to a T. So, and against opposition that's no slouch by any means. Yes, they haven't had the best of forms recently, but they're not easy to play against. So for me, I think it went really well with the first half.
Yeah, and this, Vancouver is a team that's going to make the playoffs this season, so they're no slouch. And then that takes us into the second half. We get the second goal to seemingly, I thought at the time, put the game away. Robert Taylor, instead of going right and firing, takes his defender to the left, creates space. That right center back was really struggling for them against Taylor. And then he hits the cutback pass to Leo Campana, who taps it through a couple guys. I mean, it wasn't a perfectly easy finish, but he does get the finish. Kramaski also in a decent position to tap it in. And so in the 54th minute, Inter Miami goes up 2-0. And I thought it was over at this point. We were in cruise control. I didn't think they were particularly dangerous at any point up to that point. And so I felt really good, especially considering we were on the road without, some of our guys.
Yeah, we were playing slick. We had an idea how we wanted to play, and this was a different sort of goal because we were on transition and in counter. I'm not sure who won the ball in the middle. It might have been Campana or Robert Taylor, but it was a very different goal. Deadly counter. All three combined really well. Campana to Taylor first, Benjamin Kramaski to Campana to Taylor, and then Taylor with a fantastic juke to set it up for Campana again. We were rolling, man. I think our game plan was working perfectly. At no point did I think we were going to lose this game by any means because it just felt like everyone was switched on and Vancouver just wasn't threatening that much. I haven't even seen their stats, but whatever chances they had seemed to be half chances. And I think until the penalty, which we're going to talk about, I don't remember Drake Callender making any significant saves.
Yeah, agreed. And that takes us to the 69th minute where Tota Aviles does have that shove on Fafa Picault. It goes to VAR, and they do award a penalty. Aviles lucky to not get a second yellow card in that moment. I thought for sure he was going to get kicked out of the game. But 72nd minute, Ryan Gold comes up to the penalty mark and fires past Callender. Callender very frustrated because he wanted 3 straight clean sheets, and he did go the right way and everything, but he isn't able to block the shot. 2-1, though, still everything seemingly going Inter Miami's way. But Vancouver takes this opportunity, makes a few substitutes, and really plays on the front foot to get that equalizer. And seemingly this was the point where the game really changed and it became, squeaky bum time.
Yeah, I think from then on, it was just pure park the bus Jose Mourinho strategy because we were under a lot of pressure. I think up until this point, we didn't have much that we needed to be threatened by. And then Vancouver just turned it on, man. I'm looking at the stats now. They had an expected goal of 2.25 compared to our 1.26. So I think most of those chances came in towards the end.
Yeah, almost all of them. And seemingly they felt like from minute 72 to 82-ish, they were going to get that second goal, and it was really nervy. In the 81st minute was their best chance, and that was the cross into Fafa Picault where he heads it off the post. In retrospect, that was the most dangerous opportunity, but they had a lot of time on the ball at the edge of our final third, putting crosses in, trying to be dangerous. And we really did have to sit back and defend in a way that this team isn't used to. And I think Tata set them up to do that well, took off some of the attacking players, but gave them some defensive help, putting Noah Allen in there for a third center back, giving you a back 5, playing 4 in front, having more pesky, fresh legs with Leo Alfonso, and then David Ruiz also coming into the midfield, and Federico Redondo a little bit earlier. So you had fresh legs, some size with Campana and Redondo, and 5 in the back. You really went fortress mode in the last 15 minutes of the game, and you get the result. And you got to love to see a coach trying to do something, it working, and us getting 3 points because of it.
I'm actually glad we went through those 18, 20 minutes of that pure torture that we did because it's very easy. As you mentioned, there wasn't too many chances that they created apart from like maybe hitting the post a couple of times. But when a team has so much of the ball and so many, bodies in the box, at one point their goalkeeper was playing at the halfway line. So all it takes is a stupid handball or, a deflection for the ball to just roll into the net and then completely defeat all the good work that we've been doing over the past 90 minutes. So for me, I think this was a really big win in terms of building character and in terms of building experience for this young team, because now they know they're capable of defending leads. They're capable of holding on when it matters the most. And sometimes these games, the squeaky bum time is very much necessary to try and build character. And I think that's why, as hard as it was to watch as fans, um, I thought it was a fantastic game overall. First half was all about our offense, and second half was all about our defense.
Yeah, and as a fan, it's actually very exciting because you're very nervous, you're very, on the edge of your seat, you're very in the game, right? It's not just a casual final kick the ball around 10 minutes. And so when you get the win and you get the result and you don't give up the goal, it ends up having been more fun and more electric finish. Um, I don't want to spend too much time talking about Vancouver tonight. They are not a team we're going to see again. I do think they'll make the playoffs, but as a 5, 6, 7 seed, nothing that we're going to see in the MLS Cup final. I think they might add a piece or two in the summer window. We talked about Fafa Picault in the pregame, and he's the one player that I think we probably do have to talk about. I hate him. I've always hated him. He is so dangerous. He's so pesky. I'm sure if he's on your team, you love him. He's one of those types of players, but he is awful, and I hope that Inter Miami never plays him again.
Yeah, in the last, I think from 60th minute onwards, he was just constantly on my screen, either getting fouled or doing something or getting chances or running in behind. I think he was offside like 3 times in 3 minutes. He was constantly the outlet, either on the right side or the left side. And after a point, I was like, man, this man's going to score because he's just everywhere. Thankfully, he didn't get the opportunity to score. But for me, I completely agree with you. He was an absolute menace, and I don't want to see him again until maybe next year, and maybe not even then. But I will say this: the game would have been a lot easier and a lot more composed if we hadn't conceded that penalty. And I'm sure we're going to talk about that and Aviles a little bit later. But it we sort of made it more difficult than it should have been for us, and we had the chance to bury the game by scoring another, maybe, but it just didn't seem like we had to go through the easy route. I think we had to. We say Inter Miami takes the scenic route, but towards the end of it, it didn't seem much of a scenic route.
Yeah, but we had the guys that you would want out there to see out a game like that, right? You would love to have your sixes be Redondo and Tionic Bright. And you'd love to have Kristoff, who's got size, and Aviles back there, right? We didn't lose Aviles. Obviously, Freder would be nice, but from who's available, we had the guys that we would want back there. But yeah, Fafa Picault, he's a menace. He was their most dangerous player for the entire last 25 minutes of the game. He was athletic, and it wasn't even a sense where he was beating us in transition, but he was giving Chelo Wigan a really tough time. David Ruiz was also having trouble keeping it locked down. I think David Ruiz was brought into the game just to help Chelo lock down Fafa Picault on that left side, and it just didn't work. Left side for Vancouver. And he was dangerous, man. And he got in the box and was dangerous, and he was creating for them and it was dangerous. And I didn't think anyone else in their offense was particularly dangerous at any point.
Maybe
Brian
in the
Gault,
first 10 minutes,
I'm sorry, Brian White.
goal. Yeah,
Ryan
Brian White
Gault
maybe
and
in the
Brian
first
White.
couple of minutes.
Yeah, but for the most part, I didn't think they were particularly dangerous. I did think Andres Cubas in the midfield had a good game for them. I thought he was the reason that we didn't score a third or a fourth. But other than that, I don't really have a lot to say about Vancouver because they're not a team we're intimately familiar with, and we're not going to see them again. So I don't really know if there's point in breaking down who they are and what they are.
Yeah, I completely agree.
Okay, let's talk about this team because, excuse me, we played without Lionel Messi and we won on the road. How good does that feel?
Is that the first time that we won without Lionel Messi away from home?
I can
I
check.
think it feels like a first time in a while that we won without Lionel Messi. As I mentioned, man, it just felt like a different vibe today. It felt like everything just seemed to be clicking, and this team was a lot more prepared and a lot better set up than the previous times. Every single time, it's been us falling short either tactically or not having the cutting edge in the final third, or making some sort of defensive error to cost us, an outright victory. This time around, it seemed like everything was really well set up. The DC game was potentially the last time and we've already played them twice since. So for me, I think this was the game where everyone did exactly what they were supposed to do, and it felt like a fully very wholesome performance because we had all 11 players do their job at one point during the game. And for me, I think that's nobody stood out too much. Obviously Robert Taylor with his fantastic goal and assist, but it felt like everyone had some sort of a contribution in this game. And it wasn't one of those games where you're like, oh, this was the moment that completely changed the game. It felt like everyone was performing at a consistently high level throughout the 90 minutes. And for me, that is fantastic to watch. And doing that without some of your senior players is absolutely brilliant.
This is how you win road games in the MLS if you're a normal MLS team. I know that Inter Miami is an exception since Messi and Busquets and Alba came, and so they can do things that other teams really can't. But for the normal MLS team, this is how you go on the road and win games. And I'll start with the back line. They played very disciplined. Cello barely got forward, if ever. And Jordi Alba was also consistently staying back and staying really disciplined. And you got to love that, especially because that dynamic connection he has with Lionel Messi wasn't on the pitch. And so he understands I can be more effective in this role by helping us keep a clean sheet or, by preventing the other team from scoring. And so he stayed back a lot, even when we had sustained possession, which he doesn't always do. In fact, he rarely does. So that was really good to see. And then you had a true number 6, moving forward to the midfield, a true number 6 in Yannick Bright that protected the defense, was in the right spot all the time. And again, we'll talk about him when we get to awards. But then you had 2 players that can get the ball forward, one that can get in good positions and can make nice passes and can dribble the ball a little bit. Gressel, a little bit more of a long-range passer and, precision type guy. And then a front 3, especially the middle and the left side, that can be dangerous in transition, that can be quick with the ball, that can cause turnovers, and that can get you goals when they get opportunities. And that's what they did tonight. And so from back to front, it was really a wonderful game. And I loved it. I really did.
Yeah, and I also think it was sort of a perfect storm in the sense that the way Vancouver plays, or maybe we were just set up the right way, and I want to give Tata credit for this, but it just seemed like the way our players were set up completely worked in our favor against an opposition like Vancouver, because we were able to exploit their issues really easily. And players like Kramaski and Robert Taylor had all the freedom in the world to run amok, especially in the final third. Absolutely fantastic to watch. Gressel was getting a lot more involved in the playmaking than I have previously seen him do. I think we faded over the 90 minutes and we didn't consistently keep those levels. But that's also understandable because you can't constantly have that level of threat. We are, at the end of the day, a young team when you look at it with the players that were on the pitch. So for me, I think we made the most of the personnel that were on the pitch. With regards to Jordi Alba, I agree with you that he was less adventurous going forward, but I still thought that he played at the mid-level halfway line, slightly venturing up when he wanted to, when he could. And I think he was a lot more judicious and prudent in his understanding of when he should push forward and when he should be back. And I think that worked absolutely wonders in the way we were able to defend anything from Vancouver, basically. And he didn't have much of a threat facing him offensively on that side. So,
yeah. One of the reasons that we kind of skip through the Vancouver section is because I do think there's so many interesting things to talk about with this lineup. It is so new. It's so different for what Inter Miami has put out there. And it's partially because of who wasn't on the field, but also some new guys in new positions, or having new guys in new positions also unlocked a few other players to do some other things. So I kind of want to go one by one and just talk about them. And let's start up top. Leo Campana gets a goal in this game, but he does a lot of things that Luis Suarez doesn't do. And just because Luis Suarez is a better player, we shouldn't just take for granted that Campana is significantly worse or he doesn't add something when he comes onto the pitch or when he's in the lineup, because he does. He does. And so I want to ask you the question. What do you like about Leo Campana when he comes onto the pitch and that is different than when we generally have Luis Suarez?
There are a couple of things, and I think the second goal that he scored completely, summarizes that. He's a much more physical presence than Luis Suarez. When it's set pieces, when it's occupying defenders, I know Luis Suarez does a wonderful job of sneaking through in between defenders and finding those right spots to be in. But Leo Campana is a big body. He's a big boy, and he can be physical when he needs to be, and that in itself is an added dimension in your front line. When Leo Campana is running at you, defenders can't just let him be. So he occupies space and he occupies defenders really, really well. But then his pressing. There were, I think, a couple of times where he came back all the way into the midfield, won the ball, and then ran back to expect the ball from the midfield into the final third. He adds a level of defensiveness that we don't necessarily see when someone like Luis Suarez is playing, because he presses the ball really, really well, and he starts off the defense by starting that pressing trigger. So for me, he adds a level of defensiveness to your game, which sounds ironic, but it's just true because he starts the pressing from the front. And then he's quick on transitions, and that's when I come to the second point. He was running with the ball with Robert Taylor and Benjamin Kramaski right next to him, and he was keeping pace with both of them, and he was able to make the pass to Robert Taylor and then get in the right position when he needed to. Luis Suarez is not as effective in transitions as Leo Campana is, so he gives you an opportunity, just an added impetus and an added spearhead on counterattacks, and that for me is a really, really added bonus, especially when you're under the cosh and when a team is pressuring you so much and you're pushing your back line further and further defending. He just offers an outlet that can carry the ball through up front just by himself, which is fantastic to see. So he does a lot of different things, man, and I really like it. Plus aerial presence. So a very complete striker for me.
Yeah, he really is. And he's very good in the middle of the park for a striker. He can help with build up play. He gets back there to help be an outlet for guys that are stuck. He can hold the ball and he has the technical ability to fend off a defender and has the fancy footwork to get out of trouble. He's really he's really good. And you can see the tools are there. And I understand he's not Luis Suarez as a goal scorer, but he also scores goals in different ways. And those ways can open up opportunities for this team. He is dangerous in the air. He is, a physical presence that can get in the box. And even though he doesn't find spaces like Luis Suarez, he does provide a huge target for any outlet that's getting in there and trying to make something happen. And I thought this is what we missed last week in DC, was someone in the box that could be an outlet if we got a dangerous opportunity in the final third. And we didn't have that because Suarez was playing elsewhere, trying to make things happen in other ways. And so Campana, I think part of this team is so important because he adds new dimensions from that striker position so that you can find different ways to attack a defense. He's also good defensively. And then the other thing I want to make, you talked about defensively, but the other thing is that he's a very helpful outlet for the back five when they're trying to play out, because they actually have confidence that if they boot it to him, he has a really good chance of actually collecting the ball in a way that few of our attacking options really provide. I think he's great for Drake Callender because Callender knows if he boots the ball to Leo Campana, there's a really good chance that we're going to keep it. And he doesn't feel that way about a lot of our other forward players. So he just adds so much to me in a great way. And so I just love watching him play because it's new, it's dynamic, it's interesting, and it doesn't provide the goal scoring threat that Luis Suarez does, but it does open up teams in a different way. And so I really like it when we bring on Campana, and I find it very interesting to see how we adjust to it.
Yeah, and for me, I think he's the perfect complement to a striker like Luis Suarez. And this conversation is by no means a comparison between Suarez and Campana. It's just they're two very completely different strikers, and I completely agree with this comment that he um, Suarez is very, very effective in what he does. He's a veteran striker. He's been doing it so long in this game, and he has a fantastic IQ. But obviously, Campana's young, 23, he's learning. And the point being that he has so many different dimensions to his game that you're still building on. You can still work on those and try to make him into a complete striker. His prime years are still not there yet, and he's so effective in the way he plays. Um, I think the commentators mentioned at one point when he was on the side, on the left hand side of the pitch in the first half, when he dribbled past a couple of players and showed some really fancy footwork, and they called him Twinkie Toes. And I was like, yeah, dude, this guy can do everything. This guy is big, strong, and he's really good with the ball as well. I think he needs time. Obviously, we don't want to build him up too much to be this fantastic striker who's going to replace Luis Suarez in the long term. He definitely needs time. He needs playing time, needs to get into the motions and be more consistent. But there's just so much promise there. And as you mentioned, he offers something completely different to this team, which I would love to see more of as the season progresses. Because I think after the 60th minute, if you bring him on, he's just going to be an absolute menace to other teams. So I hope Tata starts to bring him on a lot more into the team compared to just the last 15-10 minutes, because that's not as effective as a striker can be in those minutes.
Especially if we need a goal, right? He can change things dynamically in a way that few of our attacking options off the bench really can. And so, um, yeah. And we just learned today that we're going to get a nice big run of Leo Campana this summer. And so I think that there's a real chance he takes advantage of that and becomes, kind of an Inter Miami legend. I'm sure he'll get an award later, so maybe I'll save that conversation. But the next thing I wanted to talk about was the midfield and the structure. We talked about in the pregame how, at least I thought, Yannick Bright being in there would open up Julian Gressel to do the things that he would really want to do, to get forward and to get into dangerous positions. And that was something I was really excited for. Talk to me about what you saw from the midfield three and how their different styles played differently than what we've become accustomed to.
So we got Yannick Bright. Obviously, I thought he had a fantastic first start for the team. Can you believe this is the first time he's starting in the MLS? He looked fantastic. His sense of positioning is just phenomenal. He knows exactly where to be at what point. I saw him constantly scanning behind for players, seeing where the threat is coming from. And he just plugs into the position so well, exactly where the defense needs him to be. Whether it's someone going in on the overlap in the midfield, he tracks the player. If somebody needs cover on the cutback, he makes sure he's there. If the fullback is out of position and he needs to stretch out a bit to try and cover that area, he's available for that. He's constantly covering area, helping out the defense and stopping attacks. There were a couple of times, I think, and the first goal came from him sort of getting a foot into the onto the ball that Vancouver was trying to put in, and then it became a loose ball, got to Gressel. Gressel popped it over to Robert Taylor, and the rest is history. So for me, he was so effective doing that, having that sense of defensive mindedness in that midfield with a pure number six. Because let's be honest, Busquets doesn't do that. He's a deep line playmaker. He's not a deep line destroyer. I think Yannick Bright is a pure defensive six. Having that attribute and that profile in the midfield completely transforms the way Gressel plays and the way Kremaski plays. And that complements the two of them so well.
Yeah, the phrase holding midfielder implies it's someone that holds the midfield together and that doesn't let everything become wild and loose and crazy, and you don't have runners running free from the midfield into dangerous positions. And he does that so well because he just understands where to be, and for a young player, it's incredible. But he also doesn't do what Busquets does going forward. He's not world-class technically. He doesn't find those pinpoint passes, But because he doesn't do that, he doesn't roam forward and try and be dangerous because he knows that's not his game. And by staying back and staying disciplined defensively and understanding his role, it allows Gressel and Kremaski to, get forward and have a little bit more confidence and feel less burdened defensively. And that's not criticism of Busquets, because Busquets has those abilities to get forward and be dangerous. And oftentimes we want to see Busquets get higher up the field. But because Bright doesn't do that, and because he doesn't do it because he can't do it, you now understand and recognize he's going to be back there protecting you. So Gressel, who his greatest quality is his ability to make really good crosses from the right side of the pitch, either forward or into the box, now has the freedom to find positions where he can get on the ball and be dangerous in the ways that he's the most dangerous. So it unlocks his game. And then Kremaski also has the ability to get forward and intersect with Robert Taylor and feel a little bit more free to do what he wants to do going forward. So I just think that this midfield structure changes everything about what we do. It makes us more defensively solid, and it allows us a little bit more freedom for our more attacking-minded midfielders to get forward and be dangerous in the way that they can. I'm sure we'll talk about Yannick Bright later, but to me, that's what it was in the midfield. We had two guys that are good going forward with the freedom and flexibility to get forward, and you got to love that. And I think that's how you create the overloads and the defensive pressing that gives you good opportunities. And we got those and we took advantage of them.
Yeah, for me, and I was getting to what how we were able to use Gressel and Kremaski to the fullest in this game, because having someone like Yannick Bright do that defensive role unlocks Gressel, because now he's the one who's solely responsible for distributing the ball out, because Kremaski is a box-to-box A, right? He's going to run in. He's going to make those runs to make himself available in the final third. He's going to pass, give and go, link up. He's not going to be the one who's going to be doing the distribution out as such, or creating the player field by opening up the balls and sending the balls long or short, however you want to say. So Kremaski is the 8-8 who can now run up and down and do his thing, because he doesn't have to worry too much about being defensively astute, because he knows someone's in behind him. So he's automatically playing a lot better. And then you've got Gressel and Matías Rojas on the side, who I thought was very interesting, because they sort of interchanged their positions a lot. There was sometimes when Gressel was right winger, sometimes when he was playing central midfielder, but they were essentially doing the same thing every time they were in that central midfield position, which is spray the ball out. Whether it was spray the ball centrally into the midfield to Benjamin Kremaski, or to Rojas when Rojas was in that position, whether it was all the way to Robert Taylor, or whether it was down the wing to Cello Wigan, they were the ones responsible for being the progressive passers in that particular role. And for me, I absolutely loved that, because in that first 20-25 minutes, the number of times Gressel had that crossfield ball out to Robert Taylor, it was just like we were bypassing the entire middle four and going straight to their defense, which was completely open on that side of the field. And that seemed to be the plan going on that side of the pitch. And I know we want to talk about the difference between the left side and the right side of the pitch, but that midfield three, the way it was structured, they complemented each other so well in how different their profiles were. And I think there wasn't two players on that pitch who did the same thing, which really helps, because then everyone knows their role. Otherwise, when Busquets is doing that spreading, I feel like Gressel's like, okay, what am I supposed to do now? And I felt like he was a lot more assured of his role in this particular game.
Yeah, and we saw Gressel be the highest up the field at certain points.
Yeah.
And that, I want him to have the freedom to do that. And I think he's going to play at his best and be the most effective when he has the freedom to do that. And he created a few dangerous opportunities. Gressel and Rojas together, I don't know, because I didn't think Rojas had a great game. I thought they were fine for the first 20-25 minutes or so, but I thought they sort of faded after that, especially Rojas. I thought Gressel had a really good game. But yeah, let's talk about the left side versus the right side, because it was a significant difference. That left side was a lot more attacking. Robert Taylor was sort of the engine of the offense. And that right side was, as you mentioned, looking to sit back, spray balls, and maybe pull defenders out of position in order to create some space, but not nearly as dangerous or as effective. So tell me what you saw was the difference between the left and the right side for us.
For me, I think it wasn't a fluke that there was a difference between the left side and the right side. Thank you so much, guys. I thought that was a complete tactical setup. I thought Robert Taylor was the one responsible for keeping that width on the side of the pitch. At some points, he was so far into that sideline, I didn't even know he was on the pitch until the ball came to him. Especially when he scored that goal, he almost ran the ball out from the sideline and took it out to a throw. But for me, he was the one responsible for keeping that width there, and he was the long ball outlet. Throughout the game, we were trying to get the ball out from deep into him. That was the tactic on the left side, to just, whether it was Jordi Alba getting the ball up to Robert Taylor, or whether it was Grasso or Rojas getting the ball across field into Robert Taylor. It was finding him and letting him do his show, whatever he does best on that side of the pitch. The right side was completely different. The right side, I think, was the triangle three of Cello, Grasso, and Matías Rojas interlinking between one another, interchanging. They were playing very intricate football, and that was the area where we were connecting a little bit, doing a little bit of give and go, and in case Robert Taylor is not available, then playing through the midfield. There were a couple of times where Matías Rojas came into Grasso's position, passed it off to Cello, who passed it off to Grasso, and then Rojas was able to push far into the number 10 position. Grasso had a really good cut back into Rojas, and I think Rojas had a shot that got saved, or Campana had a shot that got saved. But the tactic there was to try and build it up the field rather than pop it straight long into Robert Taylor, who was already up front. We were playing very intricate on that side of the pitch. And I loved the fact that there was a complete dichotomy on the two sides of the pitch, because even though it was a little bit of an unbalance from the left and the right side, I think having those two different dimensions of play style really helped our cause. And I agree with you. I don't think Rojas had the best games over the stretch of the 90 minutes, but there were times where I really liked what he was doing in terms of popping the ball to Grasso, then moving into a new position, allowing himself to be another outlet to be available. He was a lot more further forward than he played against Orlando. And for me, I think that was absolutely fantastic to see for some periods. But I agree, he didn't do it over a sustained period of time. So I would hope he can do it more. But it just felt like a completely dichotomous situation in the way we were playing on the two sides of the pitch, and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, the asymmetric
I don't think they'll
attack.
pay me enough to be Inter Miami coach. Sorry, my asking price is too high.
Saur's out there saving the world. That's why he can't do it. This is just his fun little hobby. No, but the asymmetric attack that we had really worked, and I agree with you. I thought it was really good. And the other thing I really liked about it was we had Robert Taylor provide the width and the outlet. And sometimes this year we've seen the fullback be the guy that provides the width and the outlet, be the outlet on that left side, especially when Matías Rojas is out there, or someone else other than Robert Taylor. They cut into the midfield and they leave that space open for Jordi Alba or Franco Negri. And so I liked the fact that Robert Taylor was sticking to that sideline so that he could gather the ball and start the attack, especially against a 3-4, back three, because it feels like our go-to against the back three has traditionally been using the fullback as the wide outlet instead of the winger. And I like it a lot better, especially when you have a player like Robert Taylor who can do what he can do. And I think probably the same would apply to Robbie Robinson and maybe Matías Rojas on that left side. So I like that we played through the winger instead of trying to play through the fullback. Let's talk about the defense. Nico Freire, who was part of a very stout defense over the last month and a half, gets abducted by aliens and is no longer with us. So we bring in Sir Christophe. That's what we thought would happen when we talked about it in the midweek episode. No Ian Frey on the bench. So our backup options were Ryan Saylor and Noah Allen. And so Christophe was the obvious choice. He comes in on that left side. Tota Avila stays on the right side. Jordi Alba, a little bit more conservative, terms of how often he went forward, and then Cello Wigan, same. Talk to me about how you thought it looked, because I think our standards have risen over the last last 6 weeks.
We would have kept another clean sheet if it wasn't for Aviles absolutely losing his mind for some reason. And I think it would have been another shutout. We had a stellar defensive performance. And we had a conversation about whether Christoph should be playing in the left side or the right side, because I think, against Montreal, he had a complete miscommunication with Cello Wiegand, and it didn't work out on that side of the pitch. And you asked me this question yesterday, and I didn't make too much out of it, because I thought Tata would stick to that back four setup with Christoph on the right side, just because of the footedness of the players. And credit to you for pointing that out, whether he would switch up or not. And I'm not sure what you saw there, but I thought Christoph looked miles better when he was playing in that left side. And Aviles he's been looking great in that position on the right side of the pitch. He's developed a really good chemistry with Wiegand over the last few games. And I don't know if that was the decisive factor, but that was definitely something that I saw and I really appreciated, because I wouldn't have picked it up unless you would have mentioned it. My biggest question is, does that work if we are faced with pacey wingers? If someone is running at this defense, is Christoph and Alba the combination that you'd still be confident with? Because Alba likes to venture forward a little bit. He didn't do it as much in this game, but he does like to leave a gap in behind him, and that might stretch out Christoph completely and then leave spaces in behind. So I'm not sure if that would work against a fast pacey team, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about it, because I'm sure you pointed that specific point out yesterday, and I was really interested to know what your thoughts would be there.
Well, you know what it is. Aviles is, of the two, the more athletic center back, and he's become comfortable in that right center back spot. And you don't want to take a young player who's developing and improving and make him uncomfortable. But I think there was a couple things that made it really effective last night. First, Jordi Alba was more conservative, but even when he did get caught out of position and, was up the pitch when they had the ball, Christoph was quick to engage up the field and then quick to engage towards the sideline. But that actually played into Aviles' hands, because he has the athleticism to slide over to the central part of the park and cover that space. And so I actually think it worked really well, where Christoph was using his intelligence to engage quickly and then leaving the space behind, trusting Aviles' athleticism to cover for it. And I thought it worked really well. I agree with you. I think they would have gotten a clean sheet if it wasn't for the penalty. And I will talk about Tata Martino in a second, but I'm so impressed with him right now, because he has gotten this team's weaknesses to be not weaknesses. And I really love that. I also think having Yannick Bright ahead of you really helps. And so going to your question about pacey wingers, it's a real question mark, because they did have a pacey winger down that our right side in Fafa Picault, but on the other side, Gold and Brian White, who are kind of interchanging, aren't pacey wingers. They're sort of finishers, even though they're not been great at that lately. So, I think it's game by game right now. Atlanta's a new challenge. So we'll see what we get on Wednesday. I think it's going to be the same back four. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I think Aviles is the key to all of this. He's been playing really, really well. I do have an award for him, so we're gonna keep it.
Just
hold
it.
Yeah,
because I have a few more talking points, and we got to get to awards and stuff. So, and then Tata Martino, I think, has been great. We get Redondo in the 65th minute. The midfield becomes more solid, and you add a little bit of size to the team. David Ruiz, Leo Alfonso, Noah Allen, I thought were all defensive subs that he made in the 82nd and then 87th minute. And I think that provided us the stability we needed to see out that game. So I thought his substitutes were great. I thought putting Yannick Bright in the midfield and letting him go for a young player, I thought that was an incredible decision. I think he has the style that makes that midfield really work. So I thought he set the team up really well. I thought he aced it. And then beyond that, I want to give him a lot of credit for what he's doing in training sessions that we don't see. And we don't talk about this enough, or at least we have it on the show, but they have steadily improved the team's chemistry. That back line has gotten better. They figured out when they need to go and when they need to stay. They have figured out how to defend in transition, and they've figured out how to defend set pieces in a way that 3 months ago we would have been astonished by, because they're a good team at those things that were once weaknesses.
I think this is Tata Martino's best performance for us this season, at least. He chose to not have any of his three heavy hitters, basically leaving himself sort of shy in the front third and the midfield. And he needed to find a solution. He needed to set the team up correctly. He could have very easily gone with David Ruiz, just by the fact that he's a more senior player, more experienced. Yannick Bright hasn't really started a game this season. That would have been a completely disastrous choice for me. He made the right choice, started Yannick Bright, trusted him, set the team up fantastically well. That was half the job done, because we started off really well. Everyone knew their responsibility. And then we were faced with a little bit of a heat when Vancouver started to really play and put us under pressure. And he made the right subs. He brought on the right players. He made sure that the team was mentally prepared to deal with that onslaught for a little bit that Vancouver had against us. And we came out with all 3 points. And as much as the players performed really, really well on the pitch, I think Tata had a much bigger role to play in preparing them for this and setting them up in the correct way.
Yeah, and I want to make sure I give credit to him, not just for what he did on game day, but what he's been doing over the last couple of weeks or months in training to improve this team as a team and to attack some of the weaknesses, not by changing in a player and changing out a player, but by developing the players that he has into a more cohesive unit. It's not really something I feel like we've seen from him so far at Inter Miami up until the last couple of months, and maybe that's because we've been playing a lot of one game a week type of scenarios, so he's gotten a lot of training sessions in. But I just bravo to him and claps for getting the job done. I have a lot more to talk about, but I feel like maybe we should go to awards. Just talking points, and we probably should just skip over them. But this team just won a game on the road against a team that will make the playoffs with 5.5 of their best 11 not on the field. No Messi, no Suarez, no Busquets, no Diego Gomez, and now no Nico Frede, who's top 2 center back. And you only had Redondo for 35 minutes in this game, and they won. And I think that just shows how tremendous this depth is. And it doesn't feel like there's a single spot that was lacking. It's not like we had a player out there that we were really worried about. It's not like we had a player out there that could have really cost us the game. Everyone is up to the level, and everyone that was on the pitch last night is ready to be a part of a Supporter Shield winning team. And so I wish we could talk about it for the next 20 minutes, but maybe we should leave it at that and move on.
I will say, bring me another right back as backup to Wiegand, someone maybe who could play a centre back role as well. And this would potentially be the most complete roster that MLS has ever seen. And that's an overstatement, but I don't think so. I think it already might be, but still.
I think it already is. And I don't even think it's really a doubt. I think this is the most complete MLS team in the history of the league. I agree. If there was one place to add, it would be a right back that can play center back, or center back that can play right back, just so you have the depth in case something happens to Cello. And then give me a 30-second answer. Is Inter Miami peaking at the right time?
My doubt is that we might be peaking slightly too early. We're playing too well. But the thing is, you don't expect anything else from this team, right? Every time we go out on the pitch, we expect to win. So the only option is that we continue to play every single game and win every single game. And maybe that happens over the course of the season. We're obviously going to have a few struggles here and there. But I think, we're coming together really well. A lot of the pieces are starting to fit together. Not perfect by any means, and it's going to be a game-by-game understanding of where this roster is at and how we deal with certain injuries, players missing, and just the general dynamics of a squad. But I think we're coming together really well. Our defense is really playing well at the right time. We're looking, attacking, and threatening at the right time. We've got multiple game changers on the pitch. You can't ask for more at this stage in the season.
100%. Before we get to awards, I want to go to this question from Tony. What are the odds that Campana gets called up to? Non-existent. He is a player with Ecuadorian caps. He's 23 and he already has 15 caps. That is absolutely nothing to sneeze at. But I think he's like 4th, 5th, 6th on the Ecuadorian striker depth chart. And, you got to be top 3 to make this tournament. So unless there was a rash of injuries, he's not there. And I do think he's a guy that Ecuador really likes and thinks has a bright future, but he's 2 years away from being a real guy for them. And so I think the chances of him getting called up to Copa America are virtually zero. He hasn't been with the team in over a year. So it's just not going to happen unless they have a bunch of alien abductions. Okay, let's go to awards. As always, we do 6 awards on this show. A Miami Man of the Match, a Heron That Flew North award, and then 2 individual awards each. This is our opportunity to talk about players in a more in-depth way and individualize a little bit of it. So let's kick right into it. This week, it is my turn to give the Man of the Match. And so I'm going to give it to Robert Taylor. He gets the goal. He gets the assist. He is the difference in the game. He was the engine of the offense. He cuts on his right and scores. He cuts on his left and gets an assist. I think this was sort of the obvious choice.
I mean, you got the easy one this time around, and I hate that because I'm going to have to pick the other award. But completely agree with you, man. He looked dangerous every single time he had the ball. Not just the fact that he was being available and he was being found by his teammates, but every time he had the ball, he was sharp in all his movements. With the first goal, fantastic first touch, took the ball away from the defender, made the opportunity for himself, the angle, and shot a beautiful shot into the corner. You expect that from Robert Taylor every single day. So not too many surprises there. But then the second goal, he does a bit of a shimmy, takes the defender away, moves to the outside, and then puts the ball perfectly on a plate for Leo Campana. Both goals absolutely fantastic. But then overall, throughout the 90 minutes, he was very dangerous, and he was our prime outlet to try and create opportunities along with Jordi Alba. So for me, I think brilliantly played. We were sort of questioning whether he's going through a slump or not. Boy, that's the way to answer your critics, I guess.
Yeah, slump officially busted. He's now got 4 goals, 2 assists on the season, 6 goal contributions. I think he's on pace for 12 to 15. And I think for a guy that's playing opposite Messi and playing with Suarez, that's the number you really feel comfortable with. And I think Inter Miami would really love if they got that number from him in this season, at least, before we get into the playoffs. Anything else about him? I mean, we talked about why he was effective. We talked about how good he was, and we highlighted his big moments. So I think that's really all there is to say.
I will say one thing. I think yesterday somebody mentioned, or you asked me the question of whether his position is maybe under threat in case somebody else comes into play. And my answer was that he brings something to this team that another player in his position doesn't necessarily do that. Matías Rojas is not that kind of player. And tomorrow perfectly illustrated that, because for me, Robert Taylor is a completely different dimension of a footballer on that left wing side. Until we replace him directly with another type of player with that profile, we can't let him go. We just can't. And for me, he will be top 5 on our roster when we do it again, just by virtue of the kind of player he is and how much he brings to this team. Because when he's not on the pitch, you miss him.
Yeah, just for everyone to know what Saur's just talking about there, we are going to draft the top 20 players in Inter Miami, and we're trying to do it, a couple times this season, and that's coming up in a couple weeks. And so it'll be interesting to see where Robert Taylor lands after landing at 3rd most important player in our first edition.
Courtesy of me.
Let's go to the Heron That Flew North. This is our award for the player that was doing the wrong thing. Florida Herons, they don't fly anywhere for the winter. And so if you catch one flying north, you catch them doing the wrong thing. I just see this comment in in the chat, so I'm going to stop before we get to the Heron that flew north and come back to this. The risk to Taylor isn't Matías Rojas; it's Di Maria. I'm just going to say this, and you can have whatever thought you have, but I would be very happy if we signed on Di Maria because he's a phenomenal world-class player, but half of that would be overridden with sadness because I would understand what that means for Robert Taylor. That's all I'll say. Go ahead.
For me, this team doesn't need more superstars, man. It just doesn't. It doesn't make sense. We're too good, and at some point, it'll be too many chefs spoil the broth, and we don't want to overcommit ourselves. That's all I'll say. If Di Maria comes in, he'll be a fantastic acquisition, but as you mentioned, it'll mean something for Robert Taylor that none of us want to contemplate at this point in time. I will say Robert Taylor is potentially my favorite player on this roster, so I will keep it to that. I won't say anything else. Moving on to the Heron that flew north award. This is a hard one for me because everyone I think performed decently well. There were issues, obviously, not everyone was 100%, but there are two players that come to mind. And I have a really good award for one of them, who's the more obvious choice. So I think I'm going to go with the other one. And I'm going to give it to Matías Rojas in this one, which is very harsh because I think he had a decent game. I think he was good. He wasn't bad by any means, but somebody has to get it. And the other player just has a better award for him waiting later on. So for me, Matías Rojas, a little bit lacking. I think he started off really well. He was combining really well in the first 20, 25 minutes with Julian Gressel on that side of the pitch, getting into dangerous positions. He played multiple roles in this game. He was at times lying deep, creating those chances. He was at times playing more centrally at the number 10 position, the edge of the box. And a couple of times he was in the middle of the box, trying to be that person to find for someone like Robert Taylor to cut back into. So he played multiple roles in this game. He didn't sustain it over the course of 90 minutes. And there's one thing that I think I've realized about Matías Rojas throughout this game. We don't want to overhype this player. He is by no means Lionel Messi, and he's not going to reach those standards. There will be games that he's going to obviously suffer. He's not going to have the best of games from time to time, and we're just going to have to deal with it. Consistency might be an issue with this player, and I'll be okay with it if he comes into some games dropping a 6.5. As long as it's not a complete stinker, I'll be okay with that. Because there's going to be some games where he scores an absolute banger and we're like, okay, he's won us the game just by virtue of his absolute, phenomenal skills. So we need to hold him at a lower standard because he came in all guns blazing and steamrolling into the starting 11 with so many goal contributions. I think we just need to I need to take a step back in how I assess this player because he is going to be inconsistent. I don't think he's as consistent as someone we expect him to be. So that's all I'm going to say. That's my Heron who flew north.
First, I think that there were two potential options, and if you're going to give an award to the other guy, then I think this was the right choice. Second, I feel entirely different about Matías Rojas than you. I think he's so talented. I think he's so incredibly talented. He is so technical. He makes quick passes. He's athletic. He can find good spaces. We saw him today play a little bit more in the box to try and be a goal dangerous threat. And I would like to see more of that. I think he just needs to figure out exactly how to fit into this team in order to be phenomenal. Granted, we've been waiting for Julian Gressel to do the same thing all season. And so maybe it won't come, but I think he might be the next best player on the team in terms of his raw talent. And it's just a matter of finding a way to maximize that. I will say I think it's a Matías Rojas thing, not a Tata Martino thing. And so I think that there's a good chance that another 5 games and he's really rocking and rolling. So I think it's interesting that you say that. We have two different views.
But I love that though.
Yeah. I think there's so much talent in him. And so maybe that makes me a little bit more frustrated when it doesn't come out, but frustration is the wrong word. I think it's coming. And when it comes, I think it's going to really hit. I do agree with you about consistency. I think it might come in waves. He's not Messi, he's not Suarez, he's not going to do it every single game, but I think when it does come, it could be really pretty. And over the last couple of games, it hasn't quite been there, and I think that's just because he hasn't figured out exactly how to have that impact yet.
And by any means, it hasn't been a bad performance at all. I think this was just an average performance, maybe a little bit above average at certain times. It just wasn't phenomenal, and that's probably why I've given him this award.
Well, and listen, everyone seemingly played really well in this game, so makes perfect sense. Let's move on to my first award, which is the Coffee is Almost Ready award. Who do you think is getting this illustrious award?
The Coffee is Almost Ready award. Huh. Is this someone who okay, I can't think of anything creative here, so I'm just going to tell you who it is. It's Benjamin Kramaski. That's who it is.
If this award was for the player who makes the best cup of coffee, I actually think it might go to Benjamin Kramaski. But it's not. The coffee is almost ready implies that it's heating up. And the player that's heating up is Leo Campana, who gets this award. 2 goals in 2 games, and he was impactful in this game in a way that he hasn't been in his last couple starts. And he does come in bunches. And so I think there's a real chance that he's an impactful player for Inter Miami over the next couple games and next couple weeks. And hopefully that can carry all the way into this 6-7 game stretch during the Copa America, where he's going to be the guy that we want to lead this team to victories. And so I'm giving Leo Campana the Coffee is Almost Ready award because he is heating up.
I had another award for him as well. Mine was Dance the Waltz award because he was finally getting into rhythm. And yeah, this is a player who needs to, who needs game time, who needs to play. Obviously, it's not going to happen game in, game out because we've got Luis Suarez sitting there as our primary striker. But it doesn't hurt to have someone like Leo Campana as a backup at all. When he does things, and we've already spoken about his utility and how he offers different things, but he just does things that even if he doesn't score, he can be a real menace, especially at certain points in the game. If we're losing a little bit of momentum, put him on and let him be himself and do things that he does best, because he'll occupy defenders, he'll occupy spaces, he'll find a way to get in the faces and be a big body in there. For me, he's a fantastic striker, and I'm actually as sad as I am to lose Luis Suarez, because that's basically over the course of 7 games, I would say that's 7 or 8 goals gone, right? I'm just as excited to see Leo Campana come on, because I think he can have a really big impact when he gets a run of 7 games consistently. That being said, the fact that we don't have a clear-cut backup option might be a little bit worrying, but maybe we can play Rojas as a second striker.
That's a conversation for another day. Let's hold off on that one.
So let's enjoy Campana while we can, because he's been playing fantastically well.
I have a legacy statement for Leo Campana. He is going to be the Inter Miami all-time leading goal scorer. He will become the Inter Miami all-time leading goal scorer in the next, 6-7 weeks by the end of Copa America. He's currently sitting on 27 goals. The record is 29 for Higuain. Lionel Messi's at 23. So Lionel Messi has to score 6 goals or 7 goals in the next 2 games before he leaves for Copa America. And if he doesn't, which
it's possible,
is unlikely that he's going to score 7 goals in the next 2 games. But if he doesn't, that's going to leave a 9-game window before he comes back for Leo Campana to score 3 goals to become Inter Miami's all-time leading goal scorer. That's going to happen. Leo Campana is going to write his name in the Inter Miami record book by becoming the all-time leading goal scorer by the time the Copa America ends. You heard it here first.
I hope so, man. I hope so.
I don't know how long he'll hold it. I mean, Messi might take it from him pretty quickly, but he will hold it for at least a certain period of time. What's your first award?
All right, so my first award is Go See the Wizard of Oz award.
Go See the Wizard of Oz award is going to go to. It's going to go to Tota Aviles because he needs to go see what's behind the curtain. I don't know. Why is it going to Tota Aviles?
It is going to Tota Aviles because he needs to go get a brain. Much like the Scarecrow who needed a brain, he needs a brain because what the hell was he doing in that in that penalty box? He had a flawless performance. He was playing so well throughout. Yes, he got a yellow card at one point, but he could have actually jeopardized this entire game because I thought that would have been a red card. If that was a penalty, he should have been sent off. He got away by the skin of his teeth. That's the reason I wanted to give him this award is because I want to talk about what's lacking in Toto Aviles' game, and that's a little bit of decision making and consistency. He can have a bit of a brain fart at times, and this was one of those instances. And this is something that he needs to cut out of his game because he would have definitely cost us the points if they had scored, equalized, or even gone on to win the game if we were down to 10 men. Obviously, that didn't happen. That's all hypothetical, but he can't be going and doing those things, especially when he's on a yellow card. That was silly. That was stupid. And he needed a brain, man. And the Wizard of Oz is what's going to give him the brain.
Everything you just said is accurate, and so I won't repeat it. I will say I'm not upset about it now because it didn't cost us
Yeah,
the game. If it
for
cost
sure.
us, I would have been very upset about it. He's a 19-year-old center back. There are not a lot of 19-year-old center backs to making this big of an impact in any major league in the world. He has a world of potential, and he has really started to realize it. And so it was a stupid decision, but 19-year-old center backs are going to make stupid decisions. And I'm just glad it didn't cost us points. And I'll leave it at that.
And for me, I think he's been one of our best players of the last 3-4 games. And that's saying a lot given how much quality this team has. So he's been fantastic. But yeah, just cut out some of these silly errors and he can go so far. But I guess it's part and parcel of the game, right? It happens to everyone.
Yes. My second award is the Steely Eyed Gem. Any guesses?
The steely eyed gem is that Jordi Alba for someone who had absolute steel in his eyes because he was cutting through this entire back line of Vancouver.
It goes to Yannick Bright because he had
Oh.
steel in his eyes and was absolutely cutting through this back line of Vancouver. No, he was fearless, steel in his eyes. He was phenomenal. I love him. He's becoming one of my favorite players on this team. I don't have enough good things to say about him. I will say this. He had 10 clearances in this game. He was always in the right position. He is a true holding midfielder, and we have not seen a true holding midfielder start for this team all season. I loved every minute of it. He is only 22, playing his first. He had played 148 minutes going into yesterday's game, and so there is so much potential here. He is smart. He finds the right spots. He clears the ball. He makes you feel better about the defense. He allows the midfield to do more going forward. I love this player, and he deserved an award.
Yeah, I have not much to add to that because you've absolutely put it perfectly. I will say this though, I was watching Yannick Bright a little bit more closely than the rest of the players because I wanted to see what he does, and maybe this is me being biased, but he was definitely up for that man of the match award. If Robert Taylor hadn't had a phenomenal performance as he did, I would have given it to Yannick Bright.
Yeah,
He was,
I considered it.
it's not even overestimating how good he played. And this was his first start for Inter Miami. Do you know what this means? He was one of the main reasons we were able to do what we did in that final third because he stopped everything coming through. Yes, at times there was a little bit of sloppiness. He, obviously got that yellow card, but he made so many tackles, and I love to see the stats. He didn't have too many passes. He had 26 out of 34 passes, which is probably half of what Sergio Busquets does every game. But he had 11 out of 11 ground duels, of which 5 he won, 3 out of 3 aerial duels won, clearances 7, block shots 2, interceptions, tackles. He did everything in that game. And he was so good in that middle of the park. For me, he's got a ceiling that can go so high. And I'm going to be excited next season when he can potentially be a starter for this team, because he has elements to his game that we haven't yet seen, and I think he's got a long way to go.
Yeah, in the preseason, we saw him play a little bit of an 8, and so he can do more than just what he's done, but he's been great as a 6. And I think nothing about this performance says he doesn't deserve more starts going forward. And I'm really happy about that, because I think structurally he's a really unique and good player for us. And so to see that he can be up for the moment on the road in a big crowd and all that, he was phenomenal, and I really liked it. Okay, last award, wrap it up for us, Saur.
Okay, I have a couple of awards that I can give away, but I'm gonna go with the Obi-Wan Kenobi award.
Okay, that award goes to Sergei Kristov, because he was playing mind tricks on whoever was trying to play that right wing spot, or that right wing back spot.
You got it spot on, man.
Nice.
Sergei Kristov is not a player who's athletically gifted at this point in time by any means. We've obviously pointed out how difficult it's going to be to replace Frere, and Kristov doesn't necessarily pop out as the automatic replacement, doesn't fill us with joy, and there will be instances where we're tearing our hair out as to why he's so unathletic in that back four. But this game he was again amazing, man. I think he had a phenomenal game. His IQ is really, really good, that gets him through these games, and I think that's what we need over the next stretch of games before we can actually find a backup center back um, to replace him, or to bring to just shore up that position. But I wanted to give him credit, because he's potentially one of those players that could be the weak link in this really great squad. And yet he shows time and time again that he's capable of producing good performances when he's surrounded by the right players. Obviously, having someone like Yannick Wright really helps the cause, gives him defensive stability. But I think that might be the blueprint to get the best out of Sergei Kristov, because he's the one who's going to be playing the mind games. He's not going to be the one who's going to be chasing the shadows.
Yeah, I had an award for him too. If one of mine got taken, he was great. And you know what it is? His biggest weakness is defending in transition. And going back to what I was talking about with Tata Martino a little bit ago, the team has improved defending transition opportunities as a team. And they're not relying so much on individual brilliance and one-on-one defending as they were earlier on the season. And so I think that really helps Kristof's game. And so I think that the biggest weakness he has we've started to solve as a team. And I really, really love that. Good award. And I think he was definitely worth talking about. There's a couple other players I think deserve to be mentioned. I thought Drake Callender had a really good game. He looks commanding. I had an award for him just in case. Federico Redondo comes back into the team and looked good, looked athletic, was kind of janky, but that's always what he's like. And I'm excited to see what he can do with more minutes. Kramaski was solid, had a good game. And so it was just a lot of good performances from almost everyone. Any of those guys you want to make a comment on before we wrap it up?
We can do an entire podcast about this performance, man. It's unfortunate that we only have an hour
We
and
just
a
did.
half. I completely. There you go. Another one of those. Part 2 coming out tomorrow, guys. No, I'm kidding. Drake Callender deserved the clean sheet. He definitely deserved the clean sheet. Again, goes back to our little scarecrow who gave the penalty away, and he would have potentially saved it as well. But great game, I think, from him. He's getting back into good form. Benjamin Kramaski, I think, went under the radar. 65 minutes, he played, got a little bit tired, started to fade away. That's when I was glad that Tata took him off, because he had a really good game, especially in that first half. He was razor sharp in trying to link up some of the plays, and his passing was fantastic. Went under the radar, great game from him. And yeah, Jordi Alba had an award for as well. He's back. When he's not on the pitch, you don't necessarily realize, but when he's back, you're like, oh shit, that he brings a lot to this team. And Federico Redondo, I'm glad to see him back, man. He's going to be a big, big player in these next few games. He's going to potentially give Gressel a rest, which I'm really excited for. I know Kareem's going to absolutely love it once Gressel's on the bench. So I can't wait for that day, because that will happen. And it may be as soon as Wednesday, because that's when our next game is.
I think that Gressel won't start next weekend. That's my prediction. He'll start Wednesday against his former team, but I don't think he'll start next weekend. Just to wrap it up, we're running out of time, so we're just going to close it here. Inter Miami, 34 points through 16 games. If they win on Wednesday, they have 37 points through the first half of the season. They'll be on pace for 74 points, which would be an MLS record. The current record is 73 from the Revolution in, I believe, 2021. We will be back on Wednesday for the pregame show. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, that is a YouTube-only show. We do it in the hour before kickoff, so that's a 7:40 kickoff. We'll do it around 6:30 Eastern time, and we'll go for an hour until kickoff. Anything else, Saur, before we wrap it up?
Man, a few games coming up quick and fast, so please join us because we really enjoy these conversations and love having you in the chat, guys. So looking forward to Wednesday, another victory, hopefully.
Absolutely. Guys, we will see you next time. Enjoy your evening, and let's go get that victory on Wednesday.